Hello, this is Josh Belk with the Belk on Business podcast. Thank you for taking a moment to listen in today. On today's podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about the client onboarding process. And this particular process is one that I know in my firm, in our firm level, we've really kind of had to hammer down here over the last couple months. And I kind of through this process, kind of really learned a lot. Of course, being in business for a number of years, we've kind of just really our process has just kind of been from the hip a little bit. And just kind of figure out, hey, this is what the client's needing, this is the information that we need, kind of loosely communicate that with the client, and then roll with it. But in recent months, as our business has begun to scale, we've really kind of had to sharpen our onboarding process and really kind of dig into what that looks like, what that needs to look like, and then what the execution looks like. I actually ended up bringing somebody on and hired them specifically to, and I wouldn't say perfect, because I don't think there's a process that you ever perfect, but to greatly improve the process and document the process. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. Many times as business owners, we're so hung on the sale. So we're out there and we're constantly kind of pursuing that next client. But once we receive them, sometimes we aren't that good at getting that client onboarded and serving that client. And usually that the sales process is kind of our first impression many times with the client. But really the onboarding process is the first step in the process to where the client's going to see whether or not we're going to be able to deliver and bring value to them. And if we don't get this process right, the relationship going forward is going to kind of get off on the wrong foot, and it may really kind of end up with a question mark of whether or not the client can trust us, or if that client really feels like we can do what we said we were going to do on that sales call. So the client onboarding process. I think first of all, that client process needs to be consistent and comprehensive for your team. So like I said, here at my firm level, we brought somebody in, and it's something as a team we've worked on. And so from everybody who's been involved in this process as far as what is needed when we go to onboard a client. And so we documented through this is all the information that we need for every client. And so every client that we onboard, there is certain demographic information that we need. Okay, and then of course there's going to be client-specific documents or other deliverables that we're going to need, and that'll be kind of on a unique client-by-client basis, and I'll get there in just a moment. But what are essentially for every client, this is the information that we need. So, and we want that to be consistent, literally consistent to the point to where there was a script developed for that initial call. And then there's a specific process, step by step. This is the information that we need. Okay, so it needs to be consistent and comprehensive. It needs to be understandable. That way, if somebody else has to kind of sit in that seat and essentially handle that onboarding, they are able to sit in that seat and be able to just kind of pick up where the other person left off and be able to execute. So first of all, to have a consistent and comprehensive process for your team as it relates to onboarding. Secondly, it's relevant and comprehensive for the client. So as you kind of go through, the client kind of has a good understanding of what is being asked of them, and I think also the why. In this day and age, of course, so much value is given to data that the client doesn't feel like you're trying to upsell them on that onboarding call, or you're trying to get their data to sell to somebody else. That you don't have this feeling of you're acquiring all this information, you're invading my privacy, this is uncomfortable, whatever the case may be. You want to kind of avoid all that. So there's a lot of kind of education on the front end. This is what we're going to be asking. This is the information that we need, and then the why we're going to need that information. Of course, in our business here, we're getting a lot of personal information because it is essential as it relates to us being able to execute and to deliver the product that we need and the service that we need to deliver. So there's a little bit more understanding, but in your business, it may be very unique to some of the information that you may need. So if you're getting especially into some areas that is sensitive, whether it's banking, whether it may be racial demographics, for example, areas that can maybe get a little sensitive to a client. If it's not at all necessary, don't ask it. And then if it's something that is necessary, that they understand why you're asking the question. So first of all, the first step on client onboarding, make sure that it's consistent and comprehensive for your team. Secondly, relevant and comprehensive for the client or the customer. Third, that it's timely. So once your sales team goes and they've gone through the process and they kind of have that client kind of ready to go and you're handing it over to the team. Okay, that call ends up being timely, that it happens quickly. You're not making them wait. And it's kind of one of those basics of sales. So once that client is ready to buy, that of course you're getting the money right away that you're looking for, but also that you're right off the bat making sure that client understands that they're going to be served, they're going to be served timely, and they're going to be served well. So make sure that onboarding call, that onboarding meeting is timely. Next at that call is organized. So I mentioned earlier that you're going to have a script, you're going to have a process. Okay, but make sure that is routinely followed and that is worked on. Actually, just a couple hours before I recorded this podcast, had a couple of my team members meeting here, and this is being recorded in my conference room. And as we sat in here, we literally walked through this call once again, some of the information that we needed, making sure that we're continuing to sharpen the pencil, so to speak, as it relates to that call. How can we improve it? How can we make it better? How can we bring more value to the client in that call? Next is getting into the personal feel for each client. As I've sat in from time to time and listened to the calls that my team has had, I've noticed that there's been a lot of just calls that have kind of completely ended off having nothing to do with the business at hand, which is perfectly okay. I want that client to, whatever they feel like they need to talk about or what they'd like to talk about, whatever they'd like to share on the call, that we're willing to listen to them and we're willing to receive it. But also that call is personal to them as it relates to the specifics as to their business, or if you're in the B2C space for that particular customer that you're trying to serve. And so as you get into that process, that you understand, well, here are some unique some items that are unique to this particular client, and making sure that you know that client as well as you possibly can before you have that call, and making sure that call has a personal feel to it. That's why I think it may be best for us to avoid, if we're really wanting to be able to retain clients, to get that retention rate down, the retention rate up, to make sure that we're managing churn. A lot of that happens right off the bat, is to making sure that client feels like you care about them as a person, you care about their business, that you're not just trying to just get their information to move on to the next thing. So I think maybe there needs to be plenty of time available for that call, and then you use as little automation as possible as it relates to the call itself. Of course, the back end you can have very highly automated. It is here as well. Have a lot of automation in the process, but this particular call needs to be personal. It needs to have a person on there. I don't have a bot trying to do this, but that way the client has that personal feel on that call with the person, that they know who they're going to be working with, that they know cares about them, cares about their business, and is going to exceed their expectations. That's the last point I have here in this entire process. You're setting your expectations on the sales call, and then when you get into that actual onboarding call, that you're exceeding all of the client's expectations. So they are going to have some certain expectations as far as the information they're going to need, but if you really focus on delivering that personal touch, you're going to exceed their expectations right off the bat, and of course you're going to want to continue exceeding their expectations as you go through and you execute whatever the product or service it is that you have sold that particular client. This is Josh Belk with the Belk on Business podcast. Hope this particular podcast brought you value. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the podcast. Leave us a review. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.